Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of January 13th. And I'm bringing on another old friend. He's getting older, and I've known him a long time. For 35 years, this fellow was a track and field cross-country coach. Knows a lot about track and field, about cross-country, can tell stories about that. But when he retired, or even before he retired, he decided his real calling was to be an author about such things as track and field, cross-country, boys and girls, Title IX. A lot of stuff in there. The one and only Jim Knoedel, former track coach at Iowa State, I don't know where else besides Loyola and DePaul. How are you today, Jim?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. I had my good breakfast at Ann Sather's, and I'm coffeeed up.
Coffeeed up and ready to talk. Well, tell us a little bit about, let's just talk about the books first, because you're cranking them out. You did 2 books about boys running, that I read, and I think you were on the show about the Golden Era, A Tale of Two Runners, and A Long Road Ahead, A Tale of Two Runners Redux. And then you came out with a book for young women and older women and all people, men, women, everybody. And that one is called Run Like a Girl. I did not know that you have a 4th one out. So fill us in on all your books, Jim. Girl on the Run, it's called. Run like a girl and girl on the run.
Yeah, there you have it. No, I always wrote when I was coaching. You write recruiting letters, and athletes would save my recruiting letters, which I was surprised. So that's kind of got me writing and encouraging me to write. And when I started thinking of stories, and I used to write short stories all the time. I still have literally hundreds of short stories that I've written. And I think from that, I just as I got closer to retirement, I got the idea, I should write a book about running, because they always say, write what you know. And so after 40 years of being in this area, I know quite a bit. So that helped me a lot. And I think that the first book, called A Golden Era, started out when young athletes on my team at UIC and Loyola would say, "Oh, our era is better than your era." And I'd say, "No, there's no best era. They're all golden eras in your own mind, but they're all equally good in their own different ways." So that's what kind of.
Well, let me follow up a little bit on your, you like writing short stories, and you clearly must have read a lot in your life. How did you, what were you like as a kid, besides doing sports? I know your brother was a hotshot high jumper. You got a big family, but apparently you did some reading too. What's going on in your upbringing that leads you in this direction?
Well, I think part of it, I was raised a Catholic. I'll tell you probably the biggest reason. I was raised a Catholic, and the only way my mom could get me to go to catechism on Saturday was letting me know that I could go to the library afterwards and pick out books. And so I loved to go to the library, and I liked to sit there. It was quiet because I'm from a family of 7, and you didn't have much privacy at the time. So to get to the library where it was quiet, no one bothered you, that was heaven. I enjoyed it. So that got me started on reading at a young age. And I think that's what created my ideas, think of ideas down the road. That was probably my biggest inspiration. So in a way, being raised a Catholic was the reason I became a writer.
Well, what got you into being a track man?
We used to do all kinds of sport. I mean, we used to play, we lived on a quiet street in Iowa City. We used to play flag football in the streets, not tackle, but we literally would tear up rags. We had a rag in each side of our hip pocket. Played football in the streets. You'd have to pull the rag out of your pocket. That's more or less what we were doing. We used to play wiffle ball in the street. We'd use old bicycle tires for bases. I can remember doing that all the time. We used to have bike races around our block. We lived at an old racetrack, where a racetrack was in Iowa City. And we used to time ourselves riding around the block as fast as we could. And I mean, from 10 years old on, we did that all the time.
What kind of racetrack? Was it track or horse racing? What was it?
It was horse track. Yeah, it was horse track in Iowa City. That's what originally, like, it probably closed about in the early 20s, somewhere around there. I suspect either the war, the depression, or something closed it up. But you can tell that it's an oval on the block, on the area we live. So it's still the same. But I have three other brothers, and so competing was natural. I mean, we were fierce competitors. If it meant having to push your brother down or do anything to win, you would do it. Didn't matter. So competitive, yes.
So tell me a little bit about your experience as a competitive track guy in high school and college.
Well, I because being from a large family, I had to have a job, and so I had a paper out for a long time. And finally, I was able to go out for sports when I was in high school. That was the first time, even though I was a decent athlete in a lot of sports. But I'd played football briefly in seventh grade. I remember getting hit. I was so skinny. I got hit so hard. I was never going to do that again. And then I got cut from basketball in as a freshman. And then I realized that when I went out to track, I used to win all the time. And I was like surprised. I thought, wow, I didn't realize I was a good runner. So because in our neighborhood, we had a million kids as fast as I was, but I think I didn't realize the level of talent we have. So when I did go out for track, I had success almost immediately. I think the second time I ran the 2 mile in high school, I set the school record. So you knew that was an event. I had wished it had been in other events like the 100 or 200, or maybe the shot put or discus, but no, I picked the worst event. So such is life.
I did shot put and discus in high school, but not very well at all. So where did you go to college, Jim?
Well, I went to the University of Iowa. I grew up in Iowa City, and I think the natural inclination was to, go there. I mean, I couldn't imagine anything else. I looked at other schools, but Iowa was Iowa to me. That was the Hawkeyes, and I wanted to wear the black and gold. So that's the only place I really looked seriously. I was in high school. I was an okay athlete. I wasn't a great athlete. I mean, at the state cross country meet, I finished 13th. So I was decent, but there were better athletes than me. And I would say the same thing even in college, to be honest. I was a decent athlete, an average athlete, but I wasn't a great athlete by any stretch.
And
I'd like to think I was,
ran
but I
track
wasn't.
at Iowa? You ran track at Iowa?
Yeah, track and cross country. Yep. Yeah,
What
but I
was your,
never like at the Big Ten meet. Pardon?
I was to say, what was your event or events?
Oh, I ran the steeplechase. And I think part of the reason I ran the steeplechase was because I was athletic. I would say a good portion of track and field cross country athletes are the biggest klutzes in the world. They're terrible. They have zero talent at all. But we used to hurdle. During the summer, I go to track meets. I did the hurdle. I did the hurdles, discus. I pole vaulted, high jumped, long jumped. I did just about every single event. So nothing intimidated me. And it was easy to pick events that kind of other people shied away from because I knew I could be more successful. But even in the competition, I can remember, all my years at University of Iowa, I never won a meet ever. I got second a lot of times, but I never won. But
What brought you to Chicago? And did you become a track coach right out of college, or did you have something in between? Because you did put in 35 solid years at a few colleges as a track coach and cross country too.
yeah. I started out, I coached at Simpson. My first collegiate job was at Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa. And we were in the same conferences, coincidentally, as Graceland College, where Bruce Jenner went to school. So I saw Bruce Jenner all the time competing when it was Bruce Jenner. That's a different person now.
He's had a change in his life, right?
Yes, a major change. So a little bit different. But, I coached there, and then I went to grad school at Iowa State and coached there. And I came into Chicago when I coached Northwestern. They dropped track in '87. So I was looking for another job. I ended up at Loyola from there. So, and then eventually on to University of Illinois at Chicago. So I was always shiftless. I couldn't hold a job. It seemed like every 2 or 3 years I was moving on to something else. But eventually I was at Loyola for 8 years. So I stayed places for a while.
Talk a little bit about the time at Loyola, because I don't know, I didn't follow your career as much at while you were at U of I in Chicago, but Loyola is real close, and I got to know both you and Gordon Thompson, who is also the track coach there. And I got to go to track meets now and then, and I got to know a number of the runners, and it was really pretty wonderful for me. And what was your experience like coaching all these guys that ended up being all Americans and have gone on to be significant achieving coaches at other places these days?
Yeah, it was quite an experience because we had a lot of good athletes there. Gordon did a good job recruiting and also coaching, but he had a 4x8 that was All American. So he had 4 All Americans there. He had Eddie Slokowski was a All American, Mark Burns an All American, Jim Westfall All American. So he had a lot of All American athletes, and I think he was, maybe the best of the bunch. But there was a lot of good athletes there. So it was quite an experience. But I think one of the things that I learned from that, and I kind of learned throughout the years, it was even though you don't have the best of this or that, sometimes you have to make it the best. One of the expressions I used at University of Illinois at Chicago was, I used to hold up a bag like this, and I would talk to the team and I'd say, some people are handed a bouquet of roses. Some people, they've got the life good, they got everything is the best of the best. We've been given a bag of shit. Now you could say this is a bag. What the hell do I want a bag of shit for? Or you can say this is the best bag of shit I ever had in my life. And so you can make good things or bad things. And I always taught athletes to make the best of everything. And that's why, like at Loyola, we didn't have an indoor track. And so we literally built an indoor track up in the Alumni Gymnasium. And Michael, I know you ran in that many times.
I ran around that track a lot in my younger days, and the bleachers that were there were in front of the Heartland Cafe for many years, and I got to say they are now in my backyard, awaiting more planting around them and having a party in the summer. Let's move over back to your books. When do you actually write these days? And when did you put out your first book? Were you still coaching?
Yeah, my first book came out, The Golden Era. It came out just after I retired. I retired in 2017, and it came out that summer because I've been writing literally for 5 years because I was coaching and I didn't have time to write anything. But I always think of writing as a lot like getting in shape for a marathon. It just takes a lot of constant work, and it's some days you get a lot, some days you don't get very much at all, and so you have to be very persistent about that. But I enjoy writing a lot. It's for me actually. I know some people like to watch TV for 4 or 5 hours at a time, or blah blah blah. I like to read a lot, and I like to write a lot, and I think that. If you said to spend 5 hours writing, yeah, that'd be fine. I had no trouble doing that at all. And it takes a lot of time because I think people don't, it's like training for the marathon. You can't train for 20 minutes and get ready for 26 miles. You have to train an hour, 2 hours, put in a lot of time. And I've certainly done that over the years. So
what are some of the books you been reading?
Well, I just finished a book by Cormac McCarthy. He
Whoa.
wrote, the recent book is The Passenger. It's a recent book, but he was, quite a good writer. But I like a variety of authors. I'm trying to think. Honestly, this is true. I read so many books, I have to write them down because I'll forget that I already read that. But I think if you want to be a good writer, you have to read a lot. You can't just be a good writer and just create it. You got to see what different styles are and what works best for you.
Do you tend to write at night, in the afternoon, in the morning, or at various times?
I usually write in the morning. My wife and I walk every morning, and I get a lot of ideas for things that I want to write as I go along. And so I, think about it as we're walking. And then a lot of times I'll come right back in and take a shower, and then I'll write for 3 or 4 hours typically then. But the other thing I do, and I remember this, I got this idea from Seinfeld actually, is he always keeps a notebook by his bed so he can write ideas. And I can't tell you how many times I wake up from a dream and I have an idea for a line in my book or a episode of a story in the book, something like that. So I literally have a notebook by my bed every night now. Write. I'll wake up at 3 a.m, turn the light, write an idea, and then go back to sleep. So
I'll type. I'll
I
punch it
always think
into
of
my
writing all the time.
I punch ideas into my phone at night, and then I probably stay up longer than I should, or go hard to go back to sleep. All of your
Yeah.
books are about track and field, and in the last two, they focus on women and the role of Title IX. Would you? I think Title IX is something we want to keep reminding people about. You want to talk a little bit about Title IX and what it meant to sports in general?
Yeah. It's funny because one of the things I do to go around and promote my books is I go to high schools and I talk with the girls' track and cross country teams. And the first thing I do is I ask them to raise hands. How many know what Title IX is? And I would say, honestly, out of the hundreds of girls I've sat and talked with, maybe 1 or 2%, maybe not even that high, know what Title IX is. And the reason it's important, it's a 72 legislation that we just had that 50th anniversary last year, or 2 years ago now. But to give equal opportunities for men and women, whether it's in an educational setting, and that's the important part. But because I always tell them, you need to realize it affects you today. I think a lot of them think, well, we've got equal stuff now, blah, blah, blah. I don't have to worry about it. But continually, you read about stories in the paper like Michigan State got their women's swim team reinstated because of Title IX. University of Iowa, the women's team got reinstated because of Title IX. So there's a lot of things like that they're still getting. Women are still getting the short end of the stick. Wrestling is a good instance of that. I don't know if people follow, but they're trying to get women's wrestling, and there are programs like University of Iowa that do have, but also around states, and they're finding that women don't have equal opportunities. So that's just one example. So there's even 50 years later, they're still not treated fairly. I use the example of Northwestern, and I put this in my book at the very end. Northwestern University spends $2.3 million less for the women's sports than they do the men. And there's more women at Northwestern than there are men. So the percentage of women is about 56% at Northwestern. The rest are men. But so in theory, they should be spending 56% of their athletic budget on women, but they're not. And so the women are getting shortchanged there even today. So people think Title IX or don't know what Title IX, you're a fool. That's what I always tell them.
Well, speaking of Northwestern, and our first guest was Jeff Smith, and we talked about the rebuilding of Dyke Stadium and that issue going on in Evanston. And I meant to ask, I was reminded that Northwestern, and I think you mentioned it, got rid of track and field. And I'm just wondering if you talked about other schools bringing back various women's sports. Do you think Northwestern will ever bring back track and field, both for men and women?
I'm frustrated to say no, they won't. They dropped cross country track and field in 1987. They reinstated women's cross country only in 2000. And they don't have women's track and field, and they don't have any men's cross country or track and field. And again, like I said, they have $2.3 million spend more on the men. So there's no reason to do that. And also, when you mentioned the new the football stadium that they're building at Northwestern. That's $800 million. Now, you mean to tell me that they couldn't spend a little bit of that money for women's sports? Surprising. So
yeah,
it's
an issue we should fan the flames of. If we're talking to women in Northwestern, just let's bring that up. It's like people got to bring up what's going on in the world more than they do. Jim, go ahead. You were going to say something?
Oh, no, it's troubling because Northwestern likes to think of themselves as a, what do I say, like an institution that's Ivy League type. They're equal rights for men and women, blah, blah, blah. Well, the truth of the matter is they aren't. They're a bunch of two-faced liars. That's what I would say. A side story in this, the last cross-country meet in 1987, I went up to the press box, asked a kid, one of the athletes that was injured, how you work the scoreboard. And he said, you just do this. So I typed in Eat Me Arnie on the scoreboard and it ran across the scoreboard during the last race, the 4x4. Well, Arnold Weber was the president of the university, and he was the one that dropped track and field. And so I remember that last time I thought, well, he can't fire me. I'm not going to be here tomorrow. So and he's not going to write me a job recommendation. So I was glad to do that. And I still have a picture, and I wanted to put it in the book, but I thought, maybe not. But I still have a picture of the scoreboard that says, Eat Me Arnie for Arnold Weber, the president of the university. And I don't have much higher opinion of the current president of Northwestern University either. I think he's as ignorant of sports as Arnold Weber was.
Jim, when you're writing books, two things. When you're writing the book, are they all from real memories that you have, or do you make up stuff? How do you handle that? How much of it's people you've known, runners you've known, and I'm sure there's a chunk of that, but do you create situations in your book that are totally fictitious?
That's always an interesting question, because I would say, honestly, they're all based on real stories. But all I say is based, because one of the things that I was struck with after all many years of coaching, athletes would tell me stories about things I did, and I think, what? I said that? I did that? I have no recollection. So in a way, truth is your own truth, because that's all I remember. But these stories, some of the kids might say, that's not true, or like, yeah, but that's how I remembered. When I tell some of my athletes, like when I was coaching in drag, just for example, we left an athlete in Florida. We were traveling in 3 vans. We drove back from Miami Beach to Des Moines, Iowa. On the way back, one of the athletes went out to go to the bathroom. We thought everyone was in the van, and we took off. We didn't find out until 3 hours later, and a highway patrol car brought her back. But I mean, you get stuff like this. Now, when I told the athletes that recently, a lot of the Drake athletes that were on that trip, they didn't know that. And it's like, so it's, your perception. But that's how some of my stories, yeah, they're true, but they're not exactly true. I make it to fit the storyline that I want to have. So you got to create. That's what fiction is.
Okay, so you've got 4 books out, and they're all focused around track and field, but there's plenty of other stuff in there: concerts, visiting the Art Institute, whatever it may be. There's a lot of Chicago Midwest stuff in there that those of us who know the stuff can relate to. I'm wondering, do you have any plans for writing any books, any novels, or whatever, however you want to do it, that are not about track and field? And what are you working on now? Since you've got 4 out, I didn't even know about the 4th one.
Yeah. It's you come up with ideas, because I've actually tried to think, what would I write a next book about? I've actually written a 5th book, but I don't think I'll publish it. It's like a dark side of running, but it's probably of the 4 books I've written, it'd have the least amount of track and field in it. But track and field is like a baseline that goes throughout the entire book. But one of the things I found, and this is an interesting thing, one of the things I found with good athletes, they tend to come from a parent, male, their father and mother, who has obsessive compulsive personality type, oftentimes alcoholics. I've had some of the best athletes I've ever coached, one of their parents is alcoholics. So it's not unusual that you see the behavior I want to see as a coach, in terms of, you like to run, you run. And you don't mind like the mouse, whereas everyone else goes, this is crazy, I'm not doing any more running. So when I'm aware of that, I didn't know that before, but when I'm aware of that afterwards, I realized that's the reason why he or she was so good, because they had a parent that was alcoholic or OCD. And so I want to say disorder, but to think that any great athlete is a normal person is bull. They're not normal. They're like they're this tiny little sliver. and so it's a little bit different to get it what you want out of an athlete, unless they have that disorder. I would.
Well, I'm going to look forward to finding out more about the fifth book that you may not publish. It's darker. I read some mystery uh, running in the night books that a friend wrote. I'll go into that another time. Um, I want to thank you for coming on, and I want to ask you to share with our listeners how they get your books. Uh, you, like me, I think, are publishing them yourself, and it's a little bit, you're hustling around getting them into bookstores, et cetera. How do people find your book, and how can they get a copy of it, and where it might be?
Well, you can get ebooks of any of them on Amazon. If you want a hard copy, you'd have to go to my website, which is www.taleoftworunners.com. Taleoftworunners.com.
Taleoftworunners.com.
Yeah, so you can get it on the webpage, and I think I think that's the easiest way to get
Right on.
in touch with it.
Well, we'll be talking more. Won't be long till I see you again in the, up close. It was just when was it? November. I saw you when I did a book reading. It was great, and you asked me for what is now the intro to the show. That little rap that you say you wanted to use sometime.
Yeah. See, because I thought about using that in my next book. I like that.
Okay, Jim Knoedel, it's always great to see you, and I really thank you for sharing all this literary stuff as well as sports, two of our favorite things. And I want to